Show business is all well and good, but it can make things so terribly complicated in the matters of love. Extricating Young Gussie by P.G. Wodehouse. Read by Karl. She sprang it on me before breakfast. There, in 7 words, you have a complete character sketch of my Aunt Agatha. I could go on indefinitely about brutality and lack of consideration. I merely say that she routed me out of bed to listen to her painful story somewhere in the small hours. It can't have been 11:30 when Jeeves, my man, woke me out of the dreamless and broke the news. "Mrs. Gregson to see you, sir." I thought she must be walking in her sleep, but I crawled out of bed and got into a dressing gown. I knew Aunt Agatha well enough to know that if she had come to see me, she was going to see me. That's the sort of woman she is. She'd be sitting bolt upright in a chair, staring into space. When I came in, she looked at me in that darned critical way that always makes me feel as if I had gelatin where my spine ought to be. Aunt Agatha is one of those strong-minded women. I should think Queen Elizabeth must have been something like her. She bosses her husband, Spencer Gregson, a battered little chappie on the stock exchange. She bosses my cousin, Gussie Mannering Phipps. She bosses her sister-in-law, Gussie's mother. And worst of all, she bosses me. She has an eye like a man-eating fish, and she has got moral suasion down to a fine point. I dare say there are fellows in the world, men of blond iron, don't you know, and all that sort of thing, whom she couldn't intimidate. But if you're a chappie like me, fond of a quiet life, you zip a curl into a ball when you see her coming and hope for the best. My experience is that when Aunt Agatha wants you to do a thing, you do it, or else you find yourself wondering why those fellows in the older days made such a fuss when they had trouble with the Spanish Inquisition. "Hello, Aunt Agatha," I said. "Bertie," she said, "you look a sight. You look perfectly dissipated." I was feeling like a badly wrapped brown paper parcel. I never at my best in the early morning. I said so. Early morning? I had breakfast 3 hours ago and have been walking in the park ever since, trying to compose my thoughts. If I ever breakfasted at 8:30, I should walk on the embankment, trying to end it all in a watery grave. I am extremely worried, Bertie. That's why I have come to you. And then I saw she was going to start something, and I bleated weakly to Jeeves to bring me tea. But she had begun before I could get it. "What are your immediate plans, Bertie?" "Well, I'd rather thought of tottering out for a bite of lunch later on, and then possibly staggering round to the club, and after that, if I felt strong enough, I might trickle off to Walton Heath for a round of golf." "I am not interested in your totterings and tricklings. I mean, have you any important engagements in the next week or so?" I censured danger. "Rather," I said. "Heaps. Millions. Booked solid." "What are they?" "I, well, I don't quite know." "I thought as much. You have no engagements." "Very well, then. I want you to start immediately for America." "America?" Do not lose sight of the fact that all this was taking place on an empty stomach, shortly after the rising of the lark. "Yes, America. I suppose even you have heard of America?" "But why America?" "Because that is where your cousin Gussie is. He's in New York, and I can't get at him." "What's Gussie been doing?" "Gussie is making a perfect idiot of himself." To one who knew young Gussie as well as I did, the words opened up a wide field for speculation. "In what way?" "He has lost his head over a creature." On past performances this rang true. Ever since he arrived at man's estate, Gussie has been losing his head over creatures. He's that sort of chap. But as the creatures never seemed to lose their heads over him, it never amounted to much. I imagine you know perfectly well why Gussie went to America, Bertie. You know how wickedly extravagant your Uncle Cuthbert was." She alluded to Gussie's governor, the late head of the family. I am bound to say she spoke the truth. Nobody was fonder of old Uncle Cuthbert than I was, but everybody knows that, where money is concerned, he was the most complete chump in the annals of the nation. He had an expensive thirst. He never backed a horse that didn't get housemaid's knee in the middle of the race. He had a system of beating the bank in Monte Carlo, which used to make the administration hang out the bunting and ring the joy bells when he was sighted on the offing. Taken for all in all, dear old Uncle Cuthbert was willing to spend, or as ever called the family lawyer, a blood-sucking vampire because he wouldn't let him cut down the timber to raise another 1,000. He left her Aunt Julia very little money for a woman in her position. Beechford requires a great deal of keeping up, and poor dear Spencer, though he does his best to help, has not unlimited resources. It was clearly understood why Gussie went to America. He is not clever, but he is very good looking, and though he has no title. The Mannering Phippses are one of the best and oldest families in England. He has some excellent letters of introduction. When he wrote home to say he had met the most charming and beautiful girl in the world, I felt quite happy. He continued to rave about her for several mails. This morning a letter can come from him in which he says, quite casually as a sort of afterthought, that he knows we are broad-minded enough not to think any of the worse of her because she's on the vaudeville stage. Oh, I say. It was like a thunderbolt. The girl's name, it seems, is Ray Dennison, and according to Gussie, she does something which he describes as a single on the big time. What this degraded performance may be, I have not the least notion. As a further recommendation, he says she looked them out of their seats at Mosenstein's last week. Who she may be, and how, or why, or who or what Mr. Mosenstein may be, I cannot tell you. By Jove, I said. It's like a sort of thingamabob, isn't it? A sort of fate, what? I fail to understand you. Well, Aunt Julia, don't you know? Heredity and so forth. What's bred in the bone will come out in the wash, and all that kind of thing, Don't be absurd, Bertie. That was all very well, but it was a coincidence for all that. Nobody ever mentioned it. I've only been trying to forget it for 25 years. But it's a known fact that my Aunt Julia, Gussie's mother, was a vaudeville artist once, and a very good one, too, I'm told. She was playing in pantomime at Drury Lane when Uncle Cuthbert saw her first. Before my time, of course, and long before I was old enough to take notice the family had made the best of it, and Agatha had pulled up her socks and put in a lot of educated work. And with a microscope, you couldn't tell Aunt Julia from a genuine dyed-on-the-wool aristocrat. Women adapt themselves so quickly. I have a pal who married Daisy Trimble of the Gaiety, and when I meet her now, I feel like walking out of her presence backwards. But the other thing was, and you couldn't get away from it, Gussie had vaudeville blood in him. It looks as if he were reverting to type, or whatever they call it. By Jove, I said, for I am interested in this hereditary stuff. Perhaps the thing is going to be a regular family tradition, like you read about in books, a sort of curse of the Mannering Phippses, as it were. Perhaps the head of the family is going to marry into vaudeville forever and ever. Onto the, generation, don't you know? Please do not be quite idiotic, Bertie. There's one head of the family who is clearly not going to do it, and that is Gussie. You are going to America to stop him. Yes, but why me? Why you? You are too vexing, Bertie. Have you no sort of feeling for the family? You're too lazy to try to be a credit to yourself, but at least you can exert yourself to prevent Gussie's disgracing us. You are going to America because you are Gussie's cousin, because you've always been his closest friend, because you are only one of the family who has absolutely nothing to occupy his time except golf and nightclubs. I play a lot of action, and as you say, idiotic gambling with low dens. If you acquire another reason, you are going because I ask you as a personal favor. What she meant was that, if I refused, she would exert the full bench of her natural genius to make life a Hades for me. She held at me with her glittering eye. I've never met anyone who can give a better imitation of the ancient mariner. You will start at once, won't you, Bertie? I didn't hesitate. Rather, I said. Of course I will. Jeeves came in with the tea. Jeeves, I said, we start for America on Saturday. Very good, sir, he said. Which suits will you wear? New York is a large city conveniently situated on the edge of America. So you step off the wire and run out without an effort. You can't lose your way. You go out of a barn and down some stairs, and there you are, right in among it. The only possible objection any reasonable chappie could find to the place is that they lose you into it from all the boat at such an ungodly hour. I left Jeeves to get my baggage safely past an aggregation of suspicious-minded pirates who were digging for buried treasures among my new shirts, and drove to Gussie's hotel, where I requested the squad of gentlemanly clerks behind the desk to produce him. That's where I got my first shock. He wasn't there. I pleaded with them to think again, and they thought again, but it was no good. No Augustus Mannering Phipps on the premises. I admit I was hard hit. There I was alone in the strange city, and no sign of Gussie. What was the next step? I never wanted the masterminds on the early morning. The old bean doesn't somehow seem to get in its stride till pretty late in the PMs, and I couldn't think what to do. However, some instinct took me through a door at the back of the lobby, and I found myself in a large room with an enormous picture stretching across the whole of one wall, and under the picture a counter, and behind the counter diverse chappies in white serving drinks. They have barmen, don't you know, in New York, not barmaids. Rum idea. I put myself unreservedly into the hands of one of the white chappies. He was a friendly soul, and I told him the whole state of affairs. I asked him what he thought would meet the case. He said that in a situation of that sort, he usually prescribed a lightning whizzer, an invention of his own. He said this is what rabbits trained on when they were matched against grizzly bears. There was only one instance on record of the bear having lasted 3 rounds. So I tried a couple, and by Jove, the man was perfectly right. As I drained the second, a great load seemed to fall from my heart, and I went out in quite a braced way to have a look at the city. I was surprised to find the streets quite full. People were bustling along as if it was some reasonable hour and not the grey dawn. In the tram cars, they were absolutely standing on each other's necks. Going to business or something, I take it. Wonderful Johnnies. The odd part of it was that after the first shock of seeing all this frightful energy, the thing didn't seem so strange. I've spoken to fellows since who have been to New York, and they tell me they found it just the same. Apparently there's something in the air, either the ozone or the phosphates or something, which makes you sit up and take notice. A kind of zip, as it were. A sort of valley freedom, if you know what I mean, that gets into your blood and bucks you up and makes you feel that God's in his heaven and all is right with the world. And you don't care if you've got odd socks on. I can't express it better than by saying the thought uppermost in my mind, as I walked about the place they call Times Square, was that there were 3,000 miles of deep water between me and my Aunt Agatha. It's a funny thing about looking for things. If you hunt for a needle in a haystack, you don't find it. If you don't give a darn whether did you ever see the needle or not, it runs into you the first time you lean against the stack. By the time I strolled up and down once or twice, seeing the sights, the way the white chappie's corrective permeate my system, I always feel like I wouldn't care if Gussie and I never met again. And I'm dashed if I didn't suddenly catch sight of the old lad, as large of life, just turning in a doorway down the street. I called after him, but he didn't hear me, so I legged in in pursuit and caught him going to an office on the first floor. The name on the door was Abe Ricebitter, vaudeville agent, and from the other side of the door came the sound of many voices. He turned and stared at me. "Bertie, what on earth are you doing? Where have you sprung from? When did you arrive?" "Landed this morning. I went around to your hotel, but they said you weren't there. They had never heard of you. I've changed my name. I call myself George Wilson." "Why on earth?" "Well, you try calling yourself Augustus Mannering Phipps over here and see how it strikes you. You feel a perfect ass. I don't know where it is about America, but the broad fact is it's not a place where you can call yourself Augustus Mannering Phipps. There's another reason. I'll tell you later, Bertie. I've fallen in love with the dearest girl in the world." The pearl nut looked at me in such a deuced cat-like way, standing with his mouth open, waiting to be congratulated, that I simply hadn't the heart to tell him I knew all about that already, and I come over for the express purpose of letting him stymie. So I congratulated him. "Thanks awfully, old man," he said. "It's a bit premature, but I fancy it's going to be all right. Come along here, and I'll tell you about it. What do you want in this place? It looks a rummy spot. Well, that's part of the story. I'll tell you the whole thing." We opened the door marked "Waiting Room." I never saw such a crowded place in my life. The room was packed till the walls bulged. Gussie explained. "Pros," he said. "Music hall artiste, you know, waiting to see old Abe, a rice bitter. This is December the 1st, vaudeville's opening day. The early fall," said Gussie, who was a bit of a poet in his way, "is vaudeville's springtime. All over the country, as August wanes, sparkling comedians burst into bloom. The slap stirs in the vein of tramp cyclists, and last year's contortionists, waking from the summer sleep, tie themselves tentatively into knots. What I mean is, this is beginning the new season. Everybody's out hunting for bookings." "But what do you want? What do you want here?" "Oh, I've just got to see Abe about something. If you see a fat man with about 57 chins come out that door there, grab for him, for that'll be Abe. He's one of those fellows who advertise each step up they take in the world by growing another chin. I'm told that way back in the 90s he only had two. If you do grab Abe, remember he knows me as George Wilson. You said you were going to explain that George Wilson's business to me, Gussie, old man. Well, it's this way. At this juncture, dear old Gussie broke off short, rose from his seat, and sprang with indescribable vim at an extraordinarily short chappie who had suddenly appeared. There was a deuce of a rush for him, but Gussie had got away to a good start, and the rest of the singers, jugglers, acrobats, dancers, and refined sketch teams seemed to recognize that he had won the, the, the trick, for they ebbed back into their places again, and Gussie and I went into the inner room. Mr. Riesbitter lit a cigar and looked at us solemnly over his zareba of chins. Now, 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 let me tell you something, he said to Gussie. You listen to me. Gussie registered respectful attention. Mr. Riesbitter mused for a moment and shelved the cuspidor with indirect fire over the edge of the desk. Listen to me, he said again. I seen you rehearse, as I promised Miss Dennison I would. You ain't bad for an amateur. You got to learn, but it's in you. What it comes to is I can fix you up in the for a day if you'll take 35 per. I can't do better than that. I would have done that if the little lady hadn't kept after me. Take it or leave it. What do you say? I'll take it, said Gussie huskily. Thank you. In the passage outside, Gussie gurgled with joy and slapped me on the back. Bertie, old man, it's all right. I'm the happiest man in New York. Now what? What you see, as I was telling you when Abe came in, Ray's father used to be in the profession. He was before our time, but I remember hearing about him. Joe Danby. He used to be well known in London before he came out to America. Well, he's a fine old boy, but as obstinate as a mule. He didn't like the idea of Ray marrying me because I wasn't in the profession. Wouldn't hear of it. You remember at Oxford, I could always sing a song pretty well. So Ray got hold of old Riesbitter and made him promise to come and hear me rehearse and get me bookings if he liked my work. She stands high with him. She coached me for weeks, the darling. And now, as you heard him say, he's booked me in the small time at $35 a week. I steadied myself against the wall. The effects of the restoratives supplied by my pal at the hotel bar were beginning to work off, and I felt a little weak. Through a sort of mist, I seemed to have a vision of Aunt Agatha hearing that the head of the Mannering Phippses was about to appear on the vaudeville stage. Aunt Agatha's worship of the family name amounts to an obsession. The Mannering Phippses were an old established clan when William the Conqueror was a small boy going around with bare legs and a catapult. For centuries they have called kings by their first names and helped dukes with their weekly rent. There's practically nothing a Mannering Phipps can do that doesn't blot his escutcheon. So when Agatha would say, beyond saying it was all my fault, when she learned the horrid news, it was beyond me to imagine. Come back to the hotel, Gussie, I said. As a sportsman in her mixes things he calls whitening wizards. Something tells me I need one now. Excuse me for a minute, Gussie, I want to send a cable. It was clear to me by now that Aunt Agatha had picked the wrong man for this job of disentangling Gussie from the clutches of the American vaudeville profession. What I needed was reinforcements. For a moment I thought of cabling Aunt Agatha to come over, but reason told me this would be overdoing it. I wanted assistance, but not so badly as that. As I hit what seemed to be the happy mean, I cabled to Gussie's mother and made it urgent. What are you cabling about? Asked Gussie later. Oh, just to say I'd arrived safely and all that sort of toss, I answered. Gussie opened his vaudeville career on the following morning at a roomy sort of place uptown where they had moving pictures some of the time and in between one or two vaudeville acts. It had taken a lot of careful handling to bring him up to scratch. He seemed to take my sympathy and assistance for granted, and I couldn't let him down. My only hope, which grew as I listened to him rehearsing, was that he would be such a frightful frost at his first appearance that he would never dare to perform again. And as that would automatically squash the marriage, it seemed best to me to let the thing go on. He wasn't taking any chances. On a Saturday and Sunday, we practically lived in a beastly little music room at the offices of the publishers whose songs he proposed to use. A little chappie with a hooked nose sucked a cigarette and played the piano all day. Nothing could tire that lad. He seemed to take a personal interest in the thing. Gussie would clear his throat and begin, "There's a great big choo-choo waiting at the depot." The chap playing chords. "Is that so? What's it waiting for?" Gussie rattled at the interruption. "Waiting for me." Chappie surprised. "For you?" Gussie sticking to it. "Waiting for me." The chappie spectacly. "You don't say." Gussie. "For I'm off to Tennessee." The chappie conceding a point. "Now I live at Yonkers." He did this all through the song. First Pearl Gussie asked him to stop, but the chappie said, no, it was always done. It helped to get pep into the thing. He proved to me whether the thing didn't want a bit of pep, and I said it wanted all the pep it could get. And the chappie said to Gussie, "There you are." So Gussie had to stand it. The other song he intended to sing was one of those moon songs. He told me in a hushed voice that he was using it because it was one of the songs that the Gold Ray sang which lifted them out of their seats at Mosenstein's and elsewhere. The fact seemed to give it secret associations for him. You will scarcely believe me, but imagine I expected Gussie to show up and start performing at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I told them they couldn't be serious, as they must know that he would be rolling out for a bit of lunch at that hour. But Gussie said this was the usual thing at 4 in the day, and he didn't suppose he would ever get any lunch again until he landed on the big time. I was just consoling with him when I found out he was taking for granted that I should be there at 1 o'clock too. My idea had been that I should look in at night when, if he survived, he would be coming up for the 4th time, but I've never deserted the pal in distress, so I said goodbye to the little lunch I'd been planning at a rather decent tavern I discovered on 5th Avenue and trailed along. They were showing pictures when I reached my seat. It was one of those western films where the cowboy jumps on his horse and rides across country at 150 miles an hour to escape the sheriff, not knowing, poor chump, that he might as well stay where he is, the sheriff having a horse of his own which could do 300 miles an hour without coughing. I was just going to close my eyes and try to forget so they put Gussie's name up when I discovered that I was actually sitting next to a deucedly pretty girl. Now, let me be honest. When I went in, I had seen there was a deucedly pretty girl sitting in that particular seat, so I had taken the next one. What happened now was that I began, as it were, to drink her in. I wished they would turn the lights up so I could see her better. She was rather small, with great big eyes and a ripping smile. It was a shame to let all that run to seed, so to speak, in semi-darkness. Suddenly the lights did go up, and the orchestra began to play a tune which, though I haven't much of an ear for music, seemed somehow familiar. The next instant, out pranced old Gussie from the wings of a purple frock coat and a brown top hat, grinning clearly at the audience, tripping over his feet, blushed, and began to sing the Tennessee song. It was rotten. The poor nut had got stage fright so badly that it practically eliminated his voice. It sounded like some far-off echo of the past yodeling through a woolen blanket. For the first time since I'd heard he was about to go into vaudeville, I felt a faint hope creeping over me. I was sorry for the wretched chap, of course, but there was no denying that the thing had its bright side. No man on earth would go on paying $35 a week for this sort of performance. This was going to be Gussie's first and only. He would have to leave the stage. The old boy would say, "Unhand my daughter," and with decent luck, I saw myself leading Gussie onto the next England-bound liner and handing him over intact to Aunt Agatha. He got to the song somehow and limped off amidst roars of silence from the audience. There was a brief respite, then out he came again. He sang this time as if nobody loved him. As a song, it was not a very pathetic song, being all about coons spooning in June under the moon, and so on and so forth. But Gussie handled it in such a sad, crushed way there was genuine anguish at every line. By the time he reached the refrain, I was nearly in tears. It seemed such a rotten sort of world with all this kind of thing going on. He started the refrain, and then the most frightful thing happened. The girl next to me got up in her seat, tucked her head back, and began to sing too. I see two, but it wasn't really two, because her first note stopped Gussie dead as if he had been poleaxed. I never felt so badly conspicuous in my life. I huddled down in my seat and wished I could turn my collar up. Everybody seemed to be looking at me. In the midst of my agony, I caught sight of Gussie. A complete change had taken place in the old lad. He was looking most frightfully bucked. I must say the girl was singing most awfully well, and it seemed to act on Gussie like a tonic. When she came to the end of the refrain, he took it up, and they sang it together, and the end of it was that he went off the popular hero. The audience yelled for more and were nearly quieted when they turned down the lights and put on the film. When he recovered, I trotted around to see Gussie. I found him sitting on the box behind the stage, looking like one who had seen visions. "Isn't she a wonder, Bertie?" he said devoutly. "I hadn't a notion he was going to be there. She's playing the auditorium this week. She can only just have had time to get back to her matinee. She risked being late just to come in to see me through. She's my good angel, Bertie. She saved me. If she hadn't helped me out, I don't know what would have happened. I was so nervous I didn't know what I was doing. Now that I've got to the first show, I shall be all right." I was glad I sent that cable to his mother, who was going to need her. The thing had got beyond me. During the next week, I saw a lot of old Gussie and was introduced to the girl. I also met her father, a formidable old boy with quick eyebrows and a sort of determined expression. On the following Wednesday, Aunt Julia arrived. Mrs. Mannering Phipps, my Aunt Julia, is, I think, the most dignified person I know. She lacks Aunt Agatha's punch, but in a quiet way she has always contrived to make me feel, from boyhood up, that I was a poor worm. Not that she harries me like Aunt Agatha. The difference between the two is that Aunt Agatha conveys the impression she considers me personally responsible for all the sin and sorrow in the world, while Aunt Julia's manner seems to suggest I am more to be pitied than censored. If it wasn't that the thing was a matter of historical fact, I should be inclined to believe that Aunt Julia had never been on the vaudeville stage. She is like a stage duchess. She always seems to me to be in a perpetual state of being about to desire the butler to instruct the head footman to serve lunch in the blue room overlooking the west terrace. She exudes dignity. Yet 25 years ago, so I've been told by old boys who were lads about town in those days, she was knocking them cold at the Tivoli in a double act called Finding a Tea Shop, in which she wore tights and sang a song with a chorus that began "Rumpty-tiddly-umpty." There are some things which Happy's mind absolutely refuses to picture, and Aunt Julia singing "Rumpty-tiddly-umpty" is one of them. She got straight to the point within 5 minutes of our meeting. "What's this about Gussie? Why did you cable from me, Bertie?" "It's rather a long story," I said, and complicated. "If you don't mind, I'll let you have it in a series of motion pictures. Suppose we were looking at the auditorium for a few minutes." The girl, Ray, had been re-engaged for a second week at the auditorium, owing to the big success of her first week. Her act consisted of 3 songs. She did herself well in the matter of costume and scenery. She had a ripping voice. She looked most awfully pretty, and altogether the act was, broadly speaking, a pippin. Aunt Julie didn't speak till we were in our seats. Then she gave a sort of sigh. "It's been 25 years since I was in a music hall." She didn't say any more, but she sat there with her eyes glued on the stage. After about half an hour, the Johnnies who worked the card index system on the side of the stage put up the name of Ray Dennison. There was a great deal of applause. "Watch this act, Aunt Julia," I said. She didn't seem to hear me. 25 years. What did you say, Bertie?" "Watch this act and tell me what you think of it." "Who is it? Ray?" "Oh." "Exhibit A," I said. "The girl Gussie's engaged to." The girl did her act, and the house rose at her. They didn't want her to go. She had to come back again and again. When she had finally disappeared, I turned to Aunt Julia. "Well," I said, "I like her work. She's an artist. We will now, if you don't mind, step a goodish way uptown." And we took the subway to where Gussie, the human film, was earning his 35 per. As luck would have it, we hadn't been in the place 10 minutes when out he came. "Exhibit B," I said. Gussie. I don't quite know what I expected her to do, but I certainly didn't expect her to sit there without a word. She did not move a muscle, but just stared at Gussie as he drooled on about the moon. I was sorry for the woman, for it must have been a shock to her to see her only son in a mauve frock coat and a brown top hat, but I thought it best to let her get a stranglehold on the intricacies of the situation as quickly as possible. If I had tried to explain the error without the aid of illustrations, I should have talked all day and left her muddled about who was going to marry whom and why. I was astonished at the improvement in dear old Gussie. He got back his voice and was putting the stuff over well. It reminded me that at Oxford when, but a lad of 18, he sang "Let's All Go Down the Street" after bump supper, standing the while up to his knees in the college fountain. He was putting out just the same zip into the thing now. When he had gone off, Aunt Julia sat perfectly still for a long time, and then she turned to me. Her eyes shone queerly. "What does this mean, Bertie?" She spoke quite quietly, but her voice shook a bit. "Gussie went into the business," I said, "because the girl's father wouldn't let him marry her unless he did. If you go up to it, perhaps you wouldn't mind tottering down to 123rd Street and having a chat with him. He's an old boy with eyebrows, and he's Exhibit C on my list. When I put you in touch with him, I'd rather fancy my share of the business is concluded, and that's up to you. The Danbys lives in one of those big apartments uptown, which looks as if they cost the earth and really cost about half as much as a whole room did down in the 40s. We were shown the sitting room, and presently old Danby came in. "Good afternoon, Mr. Danby," I began. I got as far as that when there was a kind of gasping cry at my elbow. "Joe!" cried Aunt Julia and staggered against the sofa. For a long moment old Danby stared at her, and then his mouth fell open and his eyebrows shot up like rockets. "Julia!" And then they had got hold of each other's arms and were shaking them till I wondered their arms didn't come unscrewed. I'm not equal to this sort of thing at such short notice. The change in Aunt Julia made me feel quite dizzy. She had shed her grande dame manner completely and was blushing and smiling. I don't like to say such things of any aunt of mine, or I go further and put on record that she was giggling. And old Danby, who usually looked like a cross between a Roman emperor and Napoleon Bonaparte in a bad temper, was behaving like a small boy. "Joe! Julie! Dear old Joe, fancy meeting you again. Wherever have you come from, Julie?" Well, I didn't know what it was all about, but I felt a bit out of it, and I butted in. "Aunt Julia wants to have a talk with you, Mr. Danby." "I knew you in a second, Joe. It's 25 years since I saw you, kid, and you don't look a day older." "Oh, Joe, I'm an old woman." "What are you doing over here? I suppose," old Danby's cheerfulness waned a trifle, "I suppose your husband is with you?" "My husband died a long, long while ago, Joe." Old Danby shook his head. "You never ought to have married out of the profession, Julie. I'm not saying against the word. Can't remember his name, never could. But you shouldn't have done it, an artist like you. Shall I ever forget the way you used to knock them with rumpty-tiddly-umpty? Ah, how wonderful you were in that act, Joe," Aunt Julia sighed. "Do you remember the back fall you used to go down the steps? I always have said you did the best back fall in the profession. I couldn't do it now. Do you remember how we put it across at the Canterbury, Joe? Think of it. The Canterbury is a moving picture house now, and the old mogul runs French reviews. I'm glad I'm not there to see them. Joe, tell me, why did you leave England?" "Well, I wanted to change." "No, I'll tell you the truth, kid. I wanted you, Julie. You went off and married that, whatever that stager Johnny's name was, and it broke me all up." And Julie was staring at him. She is what they call a well-preserved woman. Easy to see that 25 years ago she must have been something quite extraordinary to look at. Even now she is almost beautiful. She has very large brown eyes, a mass of soft gray hair, and the complexion of a girl of 17. "Joe, you aren't going to tell me you were fond of me yourself?" "Of course I was fond of you. Why did I let you have all the fat in fun in the tea shop? Why did I hang about upstairs while you sang Rumpty-tiddly-umpty? Do you remember my giving you a big bag of buns when you were on the road at Bristol? Yes, but do you remember my giving you the ham sandwiches at Portsmouth? Joe, do you remember me giving you a seed cake at Birmingham? What do you think all that meant, if not that I loved you? Why, I was working up degrees to tell you straight out when you suddenly went off and married that cane-sucking dude. That's why I couldn't let my daughter marry this young chap, Wilson, unless he went into the profession. She's an artist." "She certainly is, Joe." "You've seen her? Where?" "At the auditorium just now." "But, Joe, you mustn't stand away from marrying the man she's in love with. He's an artist, too." "In the small time." "You were in the small time once, Joe. You mustn't look down on him because he's a beginner. I know she feels your daughter is marrying beneath her, but how on earth do you know anything about young Wilson? He's my son. Your son? Yes, Joe. And I've just been watching him work. Oh, Joe, you can't think how proud I was of him. He's got it in him. It's fate. He's my son, and he's in the profession. Joe, you don't know what I've been through for his sake. They made a lady of me. Never worked so hard in my life as I did to become a real lady. They kept telling me I had got to put it across, no matter what it cost, so that they wouldn't be ashamed of me. The study was something terrible. Had to watch myself every minute for years, and I never knew when I might fluff my lines and fall down on some bit of business. But I did it because I didn't want them to be ashamed of me, though all the time I was just aching to be back where I belonged. Old Dammy went to jump at her and took her by the shoulders. Come back where you belong, Julie, he cried. Your husband's dead, your son's a pro. Come back. It's 25 years ago, but I haven't changed. I want you still. I've always wanted you. You've got to come back, kid, where you belong. Aunt Julia gave a sort of gulp and looked at him. Joe, she said in a kind of whisper. You're here, kid, said old Danby huskily. You've come back. 25 years. You've come back and you're going to stay. She pitched forward into his arms and he caught her. Oh, Joe, 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 she said. Hold me, don't let me go. Take care of me. And I edged for the door and slipped from the room. I felt weak. The old bean would stand for a certain amount, but this was too much. I groped my way out into the street and wailed for a taxi. Gussie called to me at the hotel that night. He quivered in the room as if he had bought it in the rest of the city. Bertie, he said, I feel as if I were dreaming. I wish I could feel like that all top, I said. I took another glance at the cable that arrived half an hour ago from Aunt Agatha. I've been looking at it intervals ever since. Ray and I got back to her flat this evening. What do you think was there? The mater. She was sitting hand in hand with old Danby. Yes? He was sitting hand in hand with her. Really? They're going to be married. Exactly. Ray and I are going to be married. I suppose so. Bertie, old man, I feel immense. Look round me and everything seems to be absolutely corking. The change in the mater is marvellous. She's 25 years younger. She and old Danby are talking reviving fun in the tea shop and are going out on the road with it. I got up. Gussie, old top, I said, leave me for a while. I would be alone. I think I've got brain fever or something. Sorry, old man. Perhaps New York doesn't agree with you. When do you expect to go back to England? I looked again at Aunt Agatha's cable. With luck, I said, in about 10 years. When it was gone, I took up the cable and read it again. What is happening? It read. Shall I come over? I sucked the pencil for a while, and then I wrote the reply. It was not an easy keyboard to word, but I managed it. No, I wrote. Stay where you are. Profession overcrowded. The end.